afternoon and welcome to this Ask Paul Anything session. Welcome to all of our patrons. My name is Erin Labar. I am the manager of audience engagement for news. I apologize for this raspy voice situation. I'm just getting over a cold. And of course, I'm joined by Free Press editor Paul Samyn, who is here to answer all your questions today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. Super thoughtful, really amazing questions, actually. Some of them are very long, so we will be summarizing them to make it a little bit easier for Paul to get to the crux of the question there. We're going to go for an hour or until we run out of questions. And I think that's pretty much everything. So I'll throw it over to Paul if he wants to do a little bit of a welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. And thank you again, just to echo what Erin was saying. For your questions. For those of you who are going to be watching live or on the recording later. Two things, the timing wise, that are, I think, fortuitous. One is it is National Newspaper Week here in Canada. So it's a great opportunity for us to do an event with people who are so critical to our success and sustaining journalism in our community. So there's that. The other thing is we're sliding into the Thanksgiving long weekend, and it's an opportunity for me on behalf of our newsroom and Free Press to say thank you to our patrons. The support that you have continued to deliver is so important and so meaningful to our newsroom. So thank you, and let's get it underway. Erin, what do people want to know?
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go in the order of which the questions were submitted. So the first question was, for a number of years, the argument was that Facebook et al. Were harming traditional media by using their content for free. Recently, Facebook banned posting news in Canada, leading to a new argument that Facebook is harming Canadians by making it difficult to access the news. What do you think the right balance is?
I think the right balance is that in this day and age, when there is so much fake news, misinformation, disinformation, that anyone who does anything to get in the way of news reaching Canadians, and at the same time allows there to be an avenue, a freeway where some of that disinformation and the kind of things that are harming society still has free access to Canadians. There's something wrong with this picture. There's something fundamentally wrong with this picture. There was an attempt, an effort, a conversation under Bill C-18 that was passed that gave Facebook an opportunity to recognize the value that the journalism of the Free Press and other newsrooms across Canada was bringing, and I think that that was not a perfect solution, but one that I think that was reasonable, that worked for Facebook, that worked for newsrooms in Canada, and ultimately worked for Canadians. And I think it is just so unfortunate that we are now more than a year along where you cannot find news on Facebook anywhere. And I can't believe that in this day and age, a platform that is so influential around this world and that claims to be a place where people can come, they want to connect the world. The metaverse is all about connections. That they have severed a fundamental and essential part of that connection. People will argue, perhaps, Erin, that I am biased in this regard. So I'll state that bias freely. I am the editor of the Winnipeg Free Press. I'm speaking from our office, our newsroom. This is where I write my nightly newsletters that probably a lot of you read. And it is wrong because it is putting newsrooms in a difficult position. And when you put newsrooms in a difficult position, you're putting Canadians in a difficult position. And I just don't want it to become untenable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our next question is relating to the post-secondary initiative that I'm sure you've written about in your newsletter and probably in patron communications as well. So this patron asks, well, they say, I was very pleased to hear recently that the students at U of M and RRC can get a subscription to the Free Press. They get a free digital subscription for as long as they're a student. if you're not familiar. I hope that students at U of W will soon follow. We're working on that. My question is regarding the current status of the newspaper and education initiative for K to 12 students. Can you tell me if students at all levels in Manitoba will continue to have access to this valuable teaching resource as it currently stands?
That's a little more difficult to answer. The newspaper and education component continues to exist. Its usage, though, is not what it once was. And so for background purposes, for a long time, the newspaper industry had a curriculum supplement largely focused on literacy. And there was an opportunity for children to learn to read. And obviously from that reading would help them with their writing through newspapers. And there was a time when newspapers were delivered to the schools. So it's an online component now. We have been in conversation with schools and some of the teachers who make use of that. But the program it's not what it once was. And I think the problem, recognizing that it's not what it once was, there is an initiative underway that I can't speak to too much because it's not necessarily ready for that public space. I did foreshadow a little bit in a recent newsletter from the editor's note, which goes out Wednesday. If you're not a subscriber to that, please sign up for it. It's free. It lands in your inbox Wednesday evenings, where we are working with some educators on a broader program to address media literacy and retooling it a little bit in a way that will address what needs to be done today. Remember, newspaper and education was a program that had been around for decades, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think what kids need today is not just working on their literacy, but understand everything that is coming at them through their phone. And do we want to ensure that they have the skill set, the tools to understand what this is doing and all the negatives coming their way, so that they can mitigate that, and so that the benefits of the digital space are ones that they employ. So we are working on that. The short answer to that question, I've gone on for a period of time, is stay tuned.
Right. Okay, the next question is asking about the news cafe. So for those who don't know, we had a news cafe in the Exchange District on McDermott for a few years. You would know better than I would when that opened. But they're asking if there are any plans to resurrect the news cafe. It was a good restaurant, excellent location, and we enjoyed attending a couple of events there.
Yeah, it was a great idea that had some great success, and we did several events. I engaged with readers down there. We held some events that were so popular that people were listening to it on the sidewalk through loudspeakers, or sort of pushing up against the glass to see. So it was a good space, and it gave the Free Press sort of a storefront presence and allowed us to connect. And so it was good. The only thing, though, is just because something is good once, twice, 10 times, is it going to be good 3, 4, 5 years out? The News Cafe, I think we launched it in, I'm going to say 2010-ish. We had huge success. In fact, I've got a reaching behind Aaron. I'm not sure this is going to work. This is me walking with Justin Trudeau shortly after he was elected, and we did a meeting, an interview with him, and we had students from Children of the Earth who were present to ask some questions of the Prime Minister, and it was a great event. But that was in 2015, 2016, and in 2024, there just didn't seem to be the interest in it. Our events where once we had people lining up to get in, they were sometimes, you could count them on 2 hands. And so I think the lesson in this space is if something's not working or isn't working the way it once was, then you move on. And so there is no more Free Press News Cafe. I'm glad that people saw value in it. There were some good events. It was a really good experiment, and it had some results early were good, less good in later years. And so the News Cafe, may it rest in peace.
Okay, this next question is about inserts that go in the print edition, specifically the doors open insert. They're just wondering why we don't do it anymore.
Some of those inserts are, while they may be delivered in your newspaper, aren't necessarily something that our newsroom produces. Okay, so let's remember, I think everyone's familiar with the paper product. There's a news section, there's arts and life section, sports section. That's all stuff that comes from our newsroom. You probably know what flyers are. So if there's something from Safeway and something from Red River Co-op and well, back in the day, there would have been ones from Eaton's and Sears. We don't have those anymore, but you know, they may see something from Best Buy. Those that everyone understands that it's advertising. From time to time, there are going to be additional supplements that are usually have a degree of advertising sponsorship. We did one for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, that supplement. Doors Open frequently was a supplement kind of in that space. So whether or not we do that is dependent on whether or not those behind that initiative or other initiatives want to be partnering with the Winnipeg Free Press. Having said that, we certainly do give coverage in our news pages or our arts and life section to that event and others. So again, there's a big bundle that lands on your doorstep every Saturday, and there's going to be a variety of things. What is there one year versus the next is going to be a little dependent on whether or not the partners that we need to work with want to be in partnership.
Okay, and following along.
Door opens or closes, another one opens, Aaron, I don't know.
Following along with the why don't you do this anymore train here, we have a question about why we no longer give the team lineups for the Bomber games. Do you know why that might be?
Yeah, so again, that was a change that we began this year, and it's one we're extending to the Jets. And I think it's really important for people to, I'm going to ask you to appreciate, a newspaper is not static. News is, by definition, constantly changing. Do you want your free press to be the same free press of, what was it? Oldsmobile? It's not your dad's Oldsmobile. Do you want the free press to be your dad's or your grandfather's free press? I think the mission remains informing Manitobans, making sure they have a place they can come to that they trust to find out things that are really important to them. We have been covering the Winnipeg Jets since they first arrived in the city under Winnipeg, under the World Hockey Association. We've been covering the Bombers, I think, for as long as they have been the Bombers or the Winnipeg Football Club. So that remains, but we don't necessarily cover them in the same way. And we need to be mindful that we want to deliver things that people can't get elsewhere. Kind of the laws of supply and demand. Lineups, previously, you could only really get them in the newspaper, or if you're at the game and you bought the program. Again, I'm pointing to this thing. This is the second time. The Bombers, CFL, the NHL, NFL, I could go on and on, have all sorts of information that is going to be current that our readers can tap into. And so the question becomes, what energy are we going to put into providing that? And are we giving that strip of that roster strip? Is there something that can be better served there? And I want to talk about better served because changing. So we're not doing the game strips for the Bombers and the Jets, but we are doing things like because the NHL season's underway now, the warm up. So before every Jets game, there is essentially the equivalent almost of a program, but in a digital space that we produce with the likes of Mike and McIntyre and Ken Weeb. And again, that's a newsletter It's free. You can sign up for it, go straight into your inbox prior to puck drop, so you can get up to speed on the Jets, what they're going to be, who their opponent is, that kind of thing. And we probably will look at extending that to the Bombers next season. So we're not doing something that we used to do, but what's critical too, I think, Aaron, for our readers to understand is we're doing things that almost no other newspaper in the country is doing, which is we are traveling with the Bombers. Jeff Hamilton is on the road when the Bombers are on the road. And we're in a space now that newspapers and other than the broadcasters aren't doing that. So I hope our readers understand why we make certain changes. I hope readers appreciate that we're doing things other newspapers no longer can afford to do. And I want readers maybe to try things that perhaps are new to them. And hopefully by giving it a try, they may recognize that, say, reading the warm-up is much better than looking at a game strip that actually may be out of date by the time the Jets or the Bomb hit the ice or the Bombers take to the field.
Yeah, and for anyone who's interested in signing up for the warm up, I just dropped a link in the live chat. It will take you to a page where you can register. And as Paul mentioned, it is free, so that's always good. Let's see. This is a good one. What do you like most about being editor of the Free Press? Conversely, what do you like least about being the editor of the Free Press? And what section of the Free Press do readers enjoy most?
Okay, so first, what do I love about being the editor? I literally love every single day. I've been editor since the summer of 2012. I remind myself every day that it is a distinct honor and a privilege to sit in the same chair that John Defoe did for 44 years. I'm pretty sure I won't last as long as the esteemed John Defoe. But I think anyone who knows my sort of history or career path, I have a really slim resume. It goes like this. I delivered the newspaper, the Free Press, growing up in St. James. Then I was a camp counselor. And then I was a Free Press reporter. And so for someone who grew up in the city, delivered the newspaper, got a chance at the age of 23 to be part of this newsroom, and now to lead this newsroom and be part of that tradition, to be part of that record of service, and to continue to inform Manitobans is something that I truly love. I remain passionate about our role, our mission, and I think I've shared in one of my newsletters during COVID some of the challenges that we were facing. What has been driving me as our industry and the Free Press has had to face a number of challenges is I want to ensure that I'm not the last editor of the Winnipeg Free Press. And if I can ensure that our newsroom can manage some of the challenges that are facing our industry, and can ensure that there's a newsroom ready to, with the resources and the approaches necessary in this digital age, so that the Free Press at 152 years has another 150 years, 52 years, then I will be very, very happy. So that's what I like best about it. What do I not like about it? I don't think. Look, there's headaches. There's frustration. I shared some of my views on Facebook, and it's kind of like there's so many things that are difficult about the transition from a print focused newspaper to one operating in the digital space. And I get that, and I signed up for that. What I'm frustrated a little bit on Facebook at one point was a active partner with the Free Press and other newsrooms across the world as part of their journalism accelerator program. And we worked very close with Facebook, and they brought in a number of experts to help us grow our digital audience. And it was a really good initiative, and I think it made a fundamental difference us moving forward. And I was not just part of this process. I think to a degree I was a champion of it. Facebook had me do a number of interviews. There was a documentary that was produced that the Free Press and myself were part of. And it's when you put that energy and effort into something, believing that together the Free Press, a newspaper headquartered in the Red River Valley, and a global digital powerhouse, which is arguably the world's largest publisher in Silicon Valley, working together, I thought there was an opportunity for something great to happen. A couple years later, it's certainly not great. It's damaging, and I think those are some of the things that drive me crazy. This is a family show, so I'm told I can't use any swears, and I'll stop at that. What was the third part of that one, Aaron? What section?
What section do the Free Press readers enjoy the most, do you think?
It varies, and I think it depends. Like we have such a broad readership. Mm-hmm. Long-time readers, new readers, young, old, hopefully increasingly more diverse readers. So it's all over the map. So obviously, we were talking earlier about the Jets and the Bombers. There's going to be a lot of sports fans, and we can see our Jets traffic. Aaron can talk at length about that, the different metrics, and we can see how many stories, Jet stories, are read, how long people spend reading them. So obviously, there's a lot of Jets traffic. But it's clear that the news pages matter too. We know that letters to the editor is really important for a lot of people. And other things that people don't necessarily think of as core of a newspaper, but are really important. If we mess up the crossword, or heaven help us, if we print the wrong horoscopes, which on occasion has happened, and I apologize, we hear about it a lot. So we pay a lot of attention to what's on our front page. Obviously, we want to make sure we have the best coverage of the Jets with our warm-up, and Mike McIntyre last night filing past midnight on the Jets' big win. So that's really important. But my day is going to be very difficult if we ran the wrong answers to the crossword.
Very true. Very, very true. On the same page, what is a story or project that the paper has produced during your time as editor that you're especially proud of, or that might be your favorite? And also, do you have a favorite story or project that you worked on when you were a reporter?
Okay. I think I'll try and answer that with a couple of things. And one was a really important project that we did a couple of years ago called City Beautiful. I'm going to get up from my chair. I'm just going to grab the book. So bear with. I'm walking across my office. I hope the microphone picks this up. Ta-da. So this was a project that did not start as a book. In fact, it only started from the standpoint of trying to do something fundamentally different in terms of the presentation on our website. And so we came up with a project that Randy Turner spearheaded that looked at how architecture shaped Winnipeg's DNA. And we had to rethink what a newsroom was and how a newsroom delivers things, because for much of our history, we would come up with words and pictures, and we would put them on a page, and then we would send it your way. When we added the website initially, as we moved into the digital space, we did a bunch of typing, and we took a bunch of pictures, put it on a page, and then that stuff would all move to the website in the morning. This was a project that started first and foremost at the website. That was the focus, and we created an immersive experience which really showcased not just how beautiful our city was and the history and a bunch of things I think that Winnipeggers weren't aware of and needed to appreciate, but we wanted to do it in a way that allowed them to see the Free Press as something fundamentally different too. Again, we were not your father's newspaper. We were what you would need in a modern digital world. on all the platforms, whether you're viewing it on your desktop, whether you're viewing it on your tablet or on your phone. There was video, beautiful imagery, remarkable storytelling that told the history of our city. And then you could read it in print, and subsequently a book that went on to be a bestseller. So I think that was a really important project for us, because in our history, we had never done something that big on that scale with that kind of presentation. And it set sort of the stage for a lot of things that we did subsequently. So I think it was, to a degree, I don't know if it's a coming of age on the digital side, Aaron, but I think City Beautiful was really important for us. There are a bunch of other projects that we have done that I think have made a difference and earned national recognition. I can talk about the Graham James investigation that Jeff Hamilton did. I think that was a story that, while Canadians were aware of, they did not recognize how many people were affected, and worse, how many people, to a degree, knew that something wasn't right. And that led to the project A Stain on the Game. I'm just looking around the newsroom if there's other things I can point to. Those are two things I think that stand out.
I just dropped the links for both of those things in the chat as well if people want to take a look at them later.
Great. And Aaron, I mean, even just like last year, some work that Marcia McLeod did, the inquest files, had us win the Canadian Journalism Federation's top award. We beat out the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star, Global News, and some others. Just again, and I mention that because it's patrons who are part of this chat. It's patrons whose support for journalism make that possible. So again, a project that gets at some fundamental justice issues that disproportionately, again, affect Indigenous people. If we're not doing that project, if we're not investigating or investing in investigative journalism, then who knows that when police are involved in a fatal shooting, that there is no review, even though it's mandated by law, for 5 years, for 10 years or more. So those are a couple of things I think that were important and speak to the value of the Victory Press.
And what about one from when you were reporting?
You know, I started off in features, was a journalist, went to courts for a bit, and then I was largely a political reporter. So I was down at the Manitoba Legislature from 1993 to 97. Then I was in Ottawa as our bureau chief on Parliament Hill from 97 to 2007. So I got to do some really interesting things. They're not necessarily projects. I do have some front pages around, but three things that will stick with me. One was covering the funeral of Princess Diana. It's when you have a chance to not just do reporting, but recognize that what you're part of is history. And watch the Crown series, you could see some of that. So that was really interesting. I also covered the funeral of Pierre Trudeau. That was something that I'm still amazed at that way his death struck a chord. And then finally, I was in New York for 9/11, scrambled down there. So there's experiences and images that I was able to witness for our readers, and I'll never forget that day.
Mm-hmm. This question is about the patron program. They ask, why are there so few patron perks? This event is a good perk, but I'm not into sports. I guess that's alluding to the fact that a lot of our events are like sports tickets related. Seems to me that the Free Press could leverage some of its relationships with arts groups. In fact, any collaboration with arts groups would be welcome, as has done with the WAG. Little brainstorming with your very bright staff would go a long way. Okay,
well, that's good to hear. So we have done, I mean, I suppose to a degree, this is a perk. I think it's important conversation that we're having with our patrons. The first event of the year was a tour for patrons. We have done some things with the artists. One was a sort of a two-parter involving the Perry Theatre Exchange and Jill Wilson, who oversees the section, and the Joan Didion inspired play. We did that in the spring, and then there was a subsequent event that we did in June around National Indigenous Day on the summer solstice with Nagan Sinclair Arnagan, who's also a nominee for the Governor General's Award in fiction writing. Well done, Nagan. But with Stephen Boris at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. So we are touching on the arts things. I know we've done some sports things, Jets tickets, tickets to the Manitoba Open. Tell you what, part of the reason we're having this conversation is to hear from you and to learn. And when this call is done, Aaron, who's one door away from me, we will sit down and look and see what else we can do for our patrons.
Yeah. Okay, next question. I have noticed there is a significant increase in coverage of First Nations people issues. For me, it seems too much weight is put on First Nation issues, even though I acknowledge we have the largest Indigenous population in the country. So the question is the increased coverage of Indigenous issues part of the Winnipeg Free Press goals and objectives? I assume it is deliberate, but I want to understand why.
Okay. So I think what's really important is the Free Press is here to cover our city and province for all Manitobans and anyone who comes to us looking for information. I think part of the answer to your question is framed within your question. Our Winnipeg is home to the largest per capita Indigenous population. So by dent of the demographics, they're going to be involved in a lot of our stories. The other thing too is, so we are covering what's happening on the Indigenous side, and let's talk about it. It's not just about the landfills. It's also about what the Indigenous community is bringing to our city. The solutions downtown, whether it's the Bay, whether it's development at Portage in Maine by way of the Bank of Montreal and the office tower that the Manitoba Métis Federation have covered. I mean, those are stories too. Those are stories that if we were having this call 20 years ago, I think people would have thought would have been impossible to tell. So the Indigenous community, it is growing. It is becoming more involved in the economy. And so at multiple different points, there are stories that are going to land in our pages, and not just our news pages. Our art section has looked at any number of Indigenous performers. I think we're talking about William Prince in our pages this week as well. So you're going to see that. But the other thing I think it's important to recognize is the role that a newspaper can have in strengthening a community, in healing a community, and allowing a better way forward. And that is part and parcel of a tradition of journalism. There may have been some people in the 1960s who questioned why some newspapers in the United States were paying a lot of attention to issues surrounding Blacks in the South and the civil rights movement and marches and Selma and all those kinds of things. And I would argue that without that coverage that was delivered then, the problems that needed to be addressed and still are not fully addressed, but the progress that was made is part and parcel because journalism was putting its shoulder to the wheel. So to the extent that the Free Press can make a difference on addressing some long-standing problems of racism, disparity. We know what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has talked about. I think that it is a role. And I have all our front pages across my office for the past week so I can track what's going on. And one of them is a headline that begins, "You were wrongly convicted," in the story about Mr. Woodhouse. I can't read his name from here, but I know his surname is Woodhouse. These were things that happened in our province. And so we're reporting it in 2024 about a miscarriage of justice. I really wish that we had been paying attention to how Indigenous people were treated by the courts when they were on trial. Mm-hmm. That we'd been in a courthouse and would have said, wait a second, they're trying a guy. There's a statement that's been admitted. it's in perfectly written English, and he's not really fluent in other than his mother tongue. Something's not right here. So things weren't right there. I hope some of our coverage is helping right some wrongs today.
And then sort of on the same track, is there any update about the AMC boycott? Has it affected the newsroom at all?
I mean, it clearly has affected the newsroom because there's been conversations and there's an opportunity to learn. I wrote a piece with McGann Sinclair explaining a little bit about what we did, why we did it, and recognizing that that photo in particular of Kathy Merrick after she had collapsed on the courthouse. For those who haven't seen the photo, it's more a photo of people rushing to her aid and trying to save her life. I have had a meeting with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and there is an ongoing back and forth. So we want to make sure that there's opportunities, as I said, for us to learn and ensure that the way we practice our journalism is one that helps and does not hurt.
Mhm. Okay, next question. As a relatively small province, Manitoba needs to promote its many assets, starting with, as Nigan Sinclair says, being ground zero of reconciliation in Canada, to our combination of being an agricultural and natural resources province with strong manufacturing sector, to having an Arctic seaport with ties with Nunavut. Is the Free Press looking at trying to increase coverage and features in these areas over the next year or so?
Okay, so okay.
So manufacturing sector, Arctic seaport, natural resources, agriculture,
Okay,
those topics.
so I think there's a bunch of things that we I'll draw your attention to them to show that we are paying some attention. People can argue whether we're paying enough attention. That's fair. But obviously, I addressed the Indigenous side a little bit, and in the ongoing conversations that I've been fortunate to have with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. And I do appreciate the time that the Chiefs made for us, but we're also making time. There's a piece, talk about agriculture. There's a piece as part of our Made in Manitoba series that Aaron Epp writes. It's a feature on Manitoba businesses that are essentially success stories. We're looking at High Life, this huge pork producer in the Steinbach area. And so we're telling that story. I fully appreciate the opportunity that is our Arctic seaport. I have been to Churchill myself in 1996 when there were Lloyd Axelrod was leading a mission to try and cobble together a solution to ensure that the seaport and the rail line and everything was still working. We've had stories this week on that rail line. Previously, we had stories on beluga whales. We probably get up to Churchill not quite once a year, but maybe every 18 months. And aside from that, we're also up in the north. Julia Simone Rutgers, who's our climate change reporter in a partnership with the Narwhal, funded by the Winnipeg Foundation, is finishing up a rather extensive piece on a northern and remote part of our province that most people never get to see, and you'll be getting to see that soon. So we are paying attention to the economic parts of our province. We are the only media outlet in the province that has business reporters. We have three: Martin Cash, Aaron Epp, who I mentioned previously, and Gabrielle Pichet. What other sectors should I be touching on there, Aaron, or at least? I think you're muted, Aaron.
I think that pretty much covers it. Did you talk about manufacturing sector?
No, I mean, I think the Made in Manitoba thing it touches on manufacturing, where this was a feature that began in May, so we're not even a year into it, and we have touched on a wide range of businesses. We've looked at Pollard Banknote as an example of manufacturing that's going on and some of the technology that is so critical, and there will be more to come.
Okay. We are going to go on to kind of the future of the paper. People have some questions about that. You recently sent out a survey in regards to the newsroom's use of AI. Any updates there? What specifically are you planning wanting to use AI for?
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out how to proceed. And that part of that poll was getting some direction from our readers on what they think. And we invited readers to give us share their views. Then we reported back a week ago, letting everyone see what the results were. And I think it touches on transparency. It talks about expectations. I shared the fact that we had this idea that maybe we could get in our morning newsletter a forecast summary created by AI, so we would be able to pull something together very fast and help our workflow so we can get that information out early in the morning. And it was pretty clear that the chatbots were perhaps the worst weather forecasters ever. So that never even saw the light of day. So we play around. We're playing around with certain things. You could argue, I suppose, that we have a feature on our website that stories that we have produced, you can hear them. Essentially, you can turn your free press into an audible version, and it's been great for people who are reading impaired or visually impaired, I should say. And also allows you to listen to your free press while you're perhaps cooking supper or folding laundry or whatever else you are doing. To a degree, that is AI, because it is, we've worked with a program that takes our text and converts it into voice. From my standpoint, and working with Wendy Sawatsky, who was recently at a conference in Atlanta from the Online News Association, specifically to try and look at AI, is whatever we do is going to involve oversight by a real person, an editor with experience who understands our brand and knows the importance of trust. So the best way I think I can say to it right now, and again, we are still very much in early days. Most of us probably are familiar working with different word programs. When you're typing, you will get something flagged to say this may be spelled wrong, or suggestions, and you are looking at what the computer is telling you, but you're making the decision. Yes, that is the way we spell Labar. If I'm writing Aaron's name, it's not misspelling. It's not the bar, it's Labar. And we want to ensure that the information that can come to us, the insights and stuff that gets crunched down very quickly, faster than our reporters could do it, if it's a tool, but we are the ones wielding the hammer and making sure that we're using it right. And I'm not sure, is AI and the hammer analogy work? Matt, take it for what it's worth.
Do you mind if I add one thing to this? A lot of reporters also use transcription tools that are I guess would be AI. But even when we do that, we're still listening to the whole tape and going through and making the corrections just in case the translation is incorrect. So that's like a way that we currently use AI, but we're still like hands-on with it. Yeah.
I think the other thing, just I'm not able to answer that question though, perhaps as well as you would like, posed it, but I think that's part and parcel because we're still trying to learn.
Yeah.
There's no artificial intelligence. My wife would question whether there's any intelligence coming out of me most times. So my learning is not as quick as machine learning, and that is the same with our newsroom. So as we move forward, as we learn more things, as we decide we can apply certain things, we're going to ensure that our readership knows, understands, and if there's a problem, we're going to hear from you.
Yeah. Okay, my question is to ask why it isn't possible to add some syndicated sources such as The Guardian, some Agence Presse France. I do not know that one. The Dutch paper, Globe and Mail, to your menu offerings. We do get royally fatigued with the American worldview from the Washington Post. If your answer has to do with cost, I appreciate that, but a few items from each um, would be good, basically.
At one level, it does, cost is a consideration. So we make, we draw on a bunch of different sources. The Washington Post that you reference is one of them, Associated Press. You will see stuff from Reuters. There's some stuff that we get, the puzzles, for example. We do produce some of our puzzles locally, but we're tapping into things. And when you're tapping into something that's outside your newsroom, obviously you're having to pay for it. So for a paper that is our bread and butter is local, we're going to put most of our resources into that because we're doing what others can't or won't. Remember, Facebook is not covering City Hall. TikTok is not at the Manitoba legislature. Twitter is not at the courthouse. So we're putting our resources there to deliver something that you need that you can't get anywhere else. We do recognize, though, that we have to draw on additional resources to deliver the kind of things that readers want. Hurricane Milton, we don't have someone down there. We're going to be drawing on resources there. On additional things, you mentioned the Guardian, the Globe and Mail. There's a question about what is available, even if we were willing to pay. And the Globe and Mail is not necessarily going to share things with us because it's Globe and Mail stuff, and they want readers to go to the Globe and Mail. The Guardian, there may have been a time where the Guardian would have been open to that, but that was probably pre-digital age. I look at the Guardian most days, and so the Guardian has readership in North America, readership in Canada, and so they're not necessarily going to give up something that is going to benefit the free press and potentially hinder their growth. So it's not quite as simple as just simply saying, hey, there's a great story in the Globe and Mail. There are great stories in the Globe and Mail that you can get them. Now we did have an experiment for a period of time with the Toronto Star where we were able to share content, and I think it worked to a degree. We let readers know what we were doing, but the traffic on those Toronto Star stories wasn't huge. So that was one way that we went at augmenting what our offerings were. But given that all there is the Toronto Star produces, and considerably we were filling a void for the Toronto Star with all the free press content, it didn't seem to have a huge lift for either of us.
So we have a question from the chat. It says, I'm missing a dedicated automobile section and I'm puzzled that the only advertising from car dealers is by the Gautier company. What happened to the Birchwood people?
Well, let's see. There was a time when the Free Press had not just one auto section, but two auto sections. And that was reflective of a little bit on the support we had from the auto dealers by way of advertising. And so the economics of our business are such that journalism doesn't come for free. I know a lot of people think it is free. It's not. Okay, that's a fallacy that needs to be addressed if there's going to be understanding going forward. So there's largely two streams of revenue that a newspaper like the Free Press depends on. One is from advertisers, two is from readers. For the longest time, advertising paid the lion's share. In the days when we had enough auto advertising to fill or demand essentially two sections of weekly on stuff happening in the auto industry and telling you about the latest Mustang or what's a new feature in terms of truck. Advertising was this and readership revenue was this. Things have changed. Advertising has gone like this. Readership is going like this, to the point where if this is the reader line, there is more revenue coming to us from readers than from advertisers. And what that means is we adjust what we're doing. So we're not going to produce 24 pages of car-related coverage if there's not advertising to support it. I recognize that that is a change, but I hope that the explanation, you may not agree with it, but at least you might appreciate why we went down that road. Now, the Goche Group continues to advertise with the Free Press. Vicar continues to run ads. I don't speak for advertising, but I am aware of it, as our readers, because you will see it. I'm not going to speak to why Birchwood or others who were advertisers with this aren't. I could suggest that if you buy cars from Birchwood or someone else, or you're in the dealership, you could ask that question.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left and 2 more questions, so we're doing pretty good for time. They're both kind of in the same vein. They both start with thoughts about the future of the newspaper. One wants to know, do you think a digital-only free press will happen sooner rather than later?
I think it will happen eventually. We do not have a time frame for that. We have talked about it, but I think that the key thing would be is, and I don't think there's a really good answer. When is your digital readership at such a level that it has perhaps surpassed that of your print readership? And when you get rid of the print platform, that most of those print people might kind of migrate across digitally, and that moves that readership up. Okay. When we look at the magic 8-ball, we can't figure out exactly when that is. And I'm not sure. There have been newspapers who have gone down that way. La Presse, as an example, a very successful newspaper out of Montreal that does great work. They've gone down that road. But the trajectory of newspapers at some point will be moving to the digital space. I would suggest that the Free Press will be among the last to move away from print, which is not because we're Luddites, or it's not because we're slow. It's because our print readership remains among the strongest, most dedicated, loyal in North America. So for those of you that are print readers, thank you for that. But 2, I think it speaks to some of the strength of the brand. We want to grow our digital readership. We want to reward our print readers. And those print readers are helping us build the runway that we will need to not only be digital only, but make sure that we have the momentum to succeed in that space. So
yeah, and so then a different person wrote in asking thoughts on the future of the newspaper, not like there will always be a need for journalism, but literally, what are you doing to keep the Free Press going for the next 5 to 10 years or the next 100? Obviously, this patron program is part of it, but what other initiatives are on the table?
Well, I think I touched on some of the things. We talked a little bit, there's going to be more on media literacy. We talked about the university outreach. I think what is critically important that we have done and we need to continue to do is ensure that the journalism is strong. I think the fundamental challenge facing many papers across North America, but I'm going to talk about the Canadian context, is the post-media papers. If you have a chance to have looked at the Calgary Herald or the Edmonton Journal or the Vancouver Sun recently, you're going to see what happens when journalism is not front and center. Vancouver is a much bigger city than Winnipeg. The Vancouver Sun is a much slimmer product. And it's not just that it's slim in print and slim online, it's got very significantly less content produced locally and a lot more supplemented as part of a cookie cutter approach that Postmedia has done to fill its pages and its pixels. And that's a reflection of decisions they have made to cut back on their newsroom. If the newsroom is strong, if the newsroom continues to deliver what the community needs, what the community deserves, and if the value proposition remains strong, then there is going to be a future, because the need for news is not going to go away. So that's what we are doing. But there are other things that we are looking at. I talked about the initiative with the Narwhal, where a climate change reporter is funded from the Winnipeg Foundation. The Free Press has taken a leading role in discussions related to C-18, the journalism tax credit. Those things in part would not have come unless the Free Press was doing things to respond to the realities of today and our industry. And in a small level, I'm the chair of the National Newspaper Awards. And that institution in part is to celebrate the best in Canadian journalism. So that's an example of some of the things that we are doing, because if we can strengthen Canadian newspaper journalism across the country, there are some residual benefits. I also serve on the News Media Canada's essentially display complaint resolution review process. So if people have a problem with newspaper journalism and they file a formal complaint, I'm part of the committee that reviews it. So again, the Free Press doing things to preserve what we need to preserve here in our city and province, but also the Free Press acting on the national stage to try and ensure that newspapers everywhere are strong, because I believe if newspapers everywhere are stronger, it's a little easier for the Free Press to be strong, to serve our readers, to serve our advertisers, and fundamentally to serve and strengthen our communities.
Well, I don't think I could have picked a better spot to end if I tried. So, do you have any closing remarks?
You know, it's so important for me to connect with readers, and there's a bunch of different ways we do it. I hear from you by way of email. I get periodic calls. There are still some of you who send handwritten letters and cards, and I greatly appreciate it. It was so wonderful through the Patron program to have that tour in January, to meet some of you, to reconnect, because some of you I've met before. We did that event at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and this is something that we hadn't done before. It was a great idea from Aaron, so thank you, Aaron, for that. But again, we're not connecting directly in the sense of a conversation, but I'm hearing from you and doing my best to answer you. So again, it informs what I need, the decisions I make, because I'm hearing from those who we are dedicated to serving. So I think, Aaron, we will debrief and maybe we'll ask our patrons, but if this was a good idea during National Newspaper Week, maybe we make it an annual event.
Yeah, I think so. If I mean, obviously, we're always open to feedback, so feel free to email us anytime. And then this afternoon, you'll be getting an email through Patron Perks from me with the replay link for this. It will be open to anyone. Right now, it's restricted to patron access, but now that we're done, it will be open to anyone. So you can send it even to non-subscribers. Anyone can watch it. So I'll send that out this afternoon. And I just want to thank you all so much for watching and for sending in your questions. I think it was a really interesting discussion. And Paul, thank you for your time. And we'll see you at our next event, whatever that may be.